I walked into a church in the Philippines during Mass and kicked what they said was the body of Jesus. But what happened after that moment still terrifies me to this day. Because if Jesus truly appeared to me after that, why would he choose someone like me? My name is Karim, and I am 33 years old. 3 years ago, on a hot Sunday morning in Mindanao in the southern Philippines, I walked into a Catholic church during Mass and did something that would change my life forever. I kicked the Eucharist across the floor. At that time, I believed I was defending my faith. Now I know I was stepping into the moment that would break my pride and show me something I never thought possible. I was born in Marawi City, near the calm blue waters of Lake Lanao. The mornings there always begin with the sound of the call to prayer floating through the air while mist rises off the lake. My earliest memory is standing beside my father on a thin woven prayer mat as the first light of day came through the window. My father was a quiet man with a long gray beard and calm eyes. He worked as a teacher in our madrasa, the small school beside our mosque. Every day he taught boys how to read the Quran and how to live a disciplined life. He often told me something I never forgot. Karim, he would say, placing his hand gently on my head. A man must defend the truth even when the world stands against him. As a child, those words filled me with pride. I wanted to be strong. I wanted to be faithful. I wanted to be the kind of son my father could look at with respect. By the time I was 10 years old, I could recite long passages from the Quran without looking at the page. The elders in our neighborhood would smile and nod when they heard me read. By 15, I was helping younger boys learn their verses after school. People said I had a strong heart for faith, and I believed them, but life in Mindanao was not always peaceful. When the fighting in Marawi broke out in 2017, the sound of gunfire echoed through our streets for weeks. Buildings burned, families fled with only what they could carry. Even after the fighting ended, many homes were damaged and many people were angry. I saw churches being repaired while some mosques were still broken. I saw aid workers helping Christian villages rebuild faster than Muslim ones. Whether those things were true or not no longer mattered. In my heart, a quiet anger was growing. I began seeing the world in two simple groups, those who followed Allah and those who did not. Christians especially confused me. From childhood, I had been told they believed strange things. They prayed to Jesus as if he were God. They knelt before statues. They called a small piece of bread the body of Christ. That to me, it sounded like people had lost their way. Still, I rarely spoke about it openly. I worked in a motorcycle repair shop outside Iligan City, about an hour's drive from Marawi. The shop was small, with a rusted metal roof and the smell of engine oil always hanging in the air. From morning until sunset, I repaired scooters, replaced tires, and cleaned spark plugs for customers who passed through town. Most days were simple: engines, grease, the sound of tools hitting metal. But inside me, the anger was still there, slowly growing like a quiet fire. One Sunday morning, everything changed. The sun had just climbed high into the sky, and the heat pressed down on the road like a heavy blanket. I had just finished fixing a blue scooter for a customer who asked me to bring it to his house. The address led me down a narrow road lined with coconut trees and small houses made of wood and tin. Halfway down the street, I saw something that caught my attention. A small white church stood on the corner. Its doors were wide open. Soft music floated into the street. I slowed the scooter as I passed. Inside the building, I could see people sitting quietly in rows. Some were kneeling. Some had their heads bowed. A bell rang softly. Curious, I parked the scooter near the gate and stepped closer. I told myself I only wanted to look for a moment. The inside of the church smelled faintly of candles and polished wood. Sunlight came through colored glass windows, painting soft red and blue shapes on the floor. At the front of the church stood a man in white robes. Later, I learned he was the priest. In his hands, he held a small, round white wafer. The entire church had grown silent. People were kneeling. Some had tears in their eyes. The priest lifted the wafer high above his head. A woman near the aisle whispered quietly to someone beside her, "That is the Eucharist." Her friend nodded and whispered back, "Oh, the body of Jesus." Those words struck me like a spark landing on dry grass. The body of Jesus. Bread. They believed that bread became God. A hot wave of anger rushed through my chest. In my mind, this was not just a mistake. It was blasphemy. How could people who believed in one God worship a piece of bread? My father's voice echoed in my memory. A man must defend the truth. I stood there in the doorway watching as the priest placed the small white host onto a golden plate. Everyone remained kneeling. No one noticed me yet. The church was silent except for the faint sound of the ceiling fans turning slowly overhead. Something inside me snapped. Before I even realized what I was doing, my feet began moving. I walked down the center aisle. One step, then another. A few people looked up at me with confusion. The priest was speaking softly, finishing a prayer. I reached the front of the church. For a brief second, I hesitated. But my anger pushed me forward. I lifted my foot and kicked the Eucharist. The small white host slid across the polished marble floor. Gasps filled the church like a sudden wave. A woman screamed. Someone shouted. The priest froze in shock. For a moment, the entire room felt like it had stopped breathing. But inside me, there was no fear, only a strange sense of victory. I believed I had defended the honor of God. I turned and walked back down the aisle. No one touched me, no one stopped me. The priest slowly knelt and picked the Eucharist up from the floor. When I reached the doorway, I looked back once more, and I noticed something strange. The priest was not looking at me with anger. He looked sad, deeply sad. That look stayed in my mind longer than the shouting. I walked outside, into the bright sunlight, feeling strangely proud. The street was quiet again. Birds were singing in the trees. Motorcycles passed on the road as if nothing had happened. I started the scooter and drove away. For the rest of the day, I replayed the moment again and again. The shocked faces, the silence, the sound of the host sliding across the floor. I told myself I had done the right thing. That night, after closing the repair shop, I returned to my small apartment above the garage. The room was simple: one bed, one fan spinning slowly on the ceiling, one small window facing the street. I washed the grease from my hands, said my evening prayer, and lay down to sleep. But sleep did not come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the same image: the small white wafer sliding across the church floor, and the priest kneeling to pick it up. I turned onto my side and forced myself to rest. Eventually, my eyes closed, and sometime deep in the night, something woke me up. My room was dark. The fan hummed quietly overhead, but the air smelled strange. At first, I could not place the scent. It was faint, but clear, like bread, burning bread. I sat up slowly in the darkness, my heart beating faster. And for the first time since that morning inside the church, a small question began to form in my mind. What if kicking that Eucharist had started something I did not understand? The man at the altar did not shout. He did not run. He just looked at me. His eyes were calm, but they were wet. The room felt tight, like the air had become thick. My boot was still pressed on the small white bread on the floor. No one moved. Then a woman in the front row gasped. A child began to cry. The sound cut through the church like a knife. My friend beside me laughed loudly. He kicked another small white piece across the floor. It slid across the tile and stopped near the steps of the altar. "See," he said, "nothing happens." But I did not laugh. The man in the robe slowly stepped down from the altar. His hands shook, but his voice stayed soft. "Please," he said, "stop." One of the men with me shoved a bench. Then people in the church began to stand. Some people in the church began to stand. Some held their hands to their mouths. Some looked angry. Others looked scared. I felt heat rise in my chest. This was what we came for. We came to show them their faith was weak. But my foot would not move. I looked down again. The small white bread had cracked under my boot. A tiny piece broke off and stuck to the tile. Then something strange happened. The lights in the church flickered once, just once. The air grew cold, not a wind, just cold, like the sun had suddenly gone away. One of the candles near the altar went out. My friend laughed again. "Old building," he said, but the man in the robe looked up at the ceiling like he felt something too. The room became quiet again. Then a woman in the back whispered, "Did you feel that?" My heart began to beat faster. I told myself it was nothing, just nerves. I pulled my foot away from the bread, but when I lifted my boot, I froze. The small white piece stuck to the bottom. I tried to shake it off. It would not fall. I hit my boot against the floor, still it stayed there. My friend looked down and laughed again. "What? It glued itself to you." The others laughed too, but my chest felt tight now. The man in the robe walked slowly toward us. Each step sounded loud in the quiet church. Step, step, step. When he reached the broken bread, he knelt down, right there on the hard tile. He picked up the pieces gently, like they were something very fragile. Then he looked at me again. "Why did you do this?" he asked. His voice was not angry. That made it worse. I did not answer. Behind him, an old woman was crying. Her shoulders shook as she prayed under her breath. Another man in the church stared at us with fists tight at his sides. I felt the eyes of the whole room. My friend stepped forward again. "We came to show you the truth," he said loudly. The priest shook his head slowly. "The truth does not need anger," he said. My friend scoffed and kicked another piece of bread that had fallen near the bench. It bounced once on the tile, and then something happened that I still cannot explain. Every candle in the church flickered at the same time, all of them. The flame bent low like a wind had blown through the room, but there was no wind. The doors were closed, the windows were closed. The air became colder, much colder. A strange silence fell over everyone. Even my friends stopped laughing. I could hear my own breathing, slow, heavy. Then the bells in the church tower rang. One loud strike, boom! The sound rolled through the building like thunder. Everyone jumped. Even the priest turned toward the door. The bells were not supposed to ring. There was no one in the tower. Boom! The bell rang again. My friend looked at me now, his smile gone. Did someone go up there? He whispered. I shook my head. No one had left the room. Boom! The third strike shook dust from the old beams above us. A child began to cry harder. The priest stood slowly. His eyes were wide now. Then the strangest thing of all happened. The broken piece of bread in his hand began to glow. Not bright, just a soft light, like a small candle hidden inside it. I blinked hard. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks. But the woman in the front row gasped loudly. See, look, she cried. Everyone stared at the priest's hands. The light grew stronger, soft gold, warm. The priest dropped to his knees again. Tears rolled down his face. My Lord, he whispered. My friends backed up a step. What is that? One of them said. My heart slammed against my ribs. The light grew brighter. And then I heard something. Not with my ears, inside my head. A voice, gentle, strong, and filled with sadness. Why do you hurt what you do not understand? My breath caught in my throat. I looked around quickly. No one was speaking, but the voice came again, clearer this time. I came for all of you. My legs began to shake. The light in the priest's hands grew brighter still, filling the front of the church with warm gold. People dropped to their knees. Some cried, some prayed. My friends looked ready to run. But I could not move, because the voice spoke one more time. And this time, it called my name. How did that voice know who I was? I could not move. My knees felt weak, pressed against the cold tile. The golden light from the broken bread filled the front of the church, and yet it felt warm, comforting, even like a fire in the dead of night. My friends were frozen too, their faces pale, their eyes wide. The voice I heard before came again, soft but certain, filling the space around me. I came for all who wander without seeing, it said. I swallowed hard. The air smelled of candles and old wood, but there was something else, something sweet like honey and flowers. My hand itched to reach out, to touch the glowing bread, but I was afraid of what would happen if I did. The priest still knelt, holding the small pieces in his hands. Tears ran down his face, but his eyes shone with a light that mirrored the bread. He is here, he whispered. He has come. My friend stepped back, shaking his head. This isn't real, he muttered. Dog, but I could see it in his eyes too. Fear, yes, but also awe. The voice spoke again, and this time it was louder, closer, like it was inside my chest. Come forward. Do not fear, I see your heart. My chest felt tight. My mind raced. What did he mean? My heart? I had never thought about my heart like that. My feet moved without me thinking. They carried me closer to the priest, closer to the light. And my friends didn't follow. They stayed behind, frozen by disbelief. I knelt in front of the priest. The bread floated a little, as if held by invisible hands. The light grew brighter, wrapping around me. I could feel it inside my chest, spreading warmth from my stomach to my throat, filling every corner of me. I wanted to cry, but my throat was tight. I wanted to run, but my legs were heavy. The voice spoke again. Do you see now? All who take without understanding lose sight of what matters. I did not understand at first. I had come to laugh, to show strength, to prove that the faith of others was weak. But now, kneeling in the light, I saw something I had never noticed before. My own fear, my own anger, my own blindness. I wanted to apologize, but the words would not come. The priest raised the glowing bread higher. Light poured over my head, and the shadows in the church retreated like water from a shore. I could see every face clearly now. The old woman crying softly, the child still sobbing, the men behind me frozen in disbelief. Everyone was watching, everyone waiting. "Do you understand?" the voice asked. It was gentle, but I could feel the weight behind it, like a hand pressing on my chest. I shook my head slowly. I think I do," I whispered. The priest lowered the bread and looked at me. His eyes were kind, full of patience. "It is not enough to see. You must change. You must listen." My mind reeled. Change, listen. I had never thought about that. I had only acted, only reacted. But now, kneeling here, I felt something shift inside me. The anger that had burned so fiercely began to melt. The fear that had tightened my chest loosened. I wanted to understand. I wanted to hear more. The light pulsed gently like a heartbeat. I could hear the faint hum of it, low and steady. The priest began to speak softly, words I could not understand, but they seemed to calm me further, like a lullaby for my soul. I looked at my friends. Their faces were pale, frightened, unwilling. I wanted to tell them to come forward, but they shook their heads. The glow of the bread reflected in their eyes, but it did not reach their hearts. I realized then that not everyone would see, not everyone would understand. The voice spoke again, and this time, it was only for me. "The path is yours. What will you do with what you have seen?" My chest ached. My heart thumped in my ears. I wanted to run. I wanted to hide. I wanted to be anywhere but here. But something inside me would not let me move. Something told me that this moment, this light, this voice was the most important thing I had ever experienced. I reached out slowly, trembling. My fingers brushed the glowing bread. The warmth spread instantly into my whole body. The light wrapped around me, gentle but firm, like an embrace I had been missing my entire life. I closed my eyes. The warmth, the glow, the voice, it all filled me. I felt my anger, my pride, my doubt melt into something new, something I could not yet name. When I opened my eyes again, the bread had stopped glowing. The church was quiet. My friends were staring at me, unsure what had happened. The priest smiled gently. "It is only the beginning," he said. I felt my chest tighten again, but not with fear. This time, it was a weight of understanding, a question that I could not yet answer. Was this real, or had I imagined it all? And if it was real, what did it mean for me? I stepped outside into the humid afternoon, the heat of the Philippine sun pressing down on my shoulders. The streets were crowded, the noise of motorcycles and vendors mixing with the cries of children. But I barely noticed. My mind was still full of the light, the warmth, the voice that had spoken to me in the church. My heart ached with a mixture of fear and wonder. I walked slowly, my feet dragging over the uneven pavement. People passed me, brushing shoulders, shouting greetings, haggling over prices. None of them saw me. None of them felt what I felt. I clutched my chest, as if holding in the light I had carried from the church. It burned gently, like embers in a fireplace, warm and steady. I remembered the priest's words. "The path is yours. What will you do with what you have seen?" I did not know yet. My hands shook as I pushed open the door of a small tea shop. The air inside smelled of boiled water and sugar, of fried dough and roasted coffee beans. I sank into a wooden chair, my body heavy with the weight of what I had experienced. The shop owner, an older woman with hair streaked gray, smiled at me. "You look troubled, Anak," she said softly. Her eyes were kind. I wanted to tell her everything, but the words stuck in my throat. I could barely speak. I sat in silence, staring at the steam rising from my cup. My mind replayed every detail of the church, the glow of the bread, the voice, the warmth that had spread inside me. I wanted to understand it, to grasp it fully, but it slipped through my thoughts like water through my fingers. Outside, the wind picked up, stirring dust along the street. I could hear laughter and shouting, the life of the city moving on, as if nothing had happened. And yet, everything had changed for me. The anger I had felt toward the Christians, toward the priest, toward the world itself, had softened. I wanted to understand more, to see beyond what my eyes could see. I walked again, this time toward the small park near the river. The grass was wet from an earlier rain, and the smell of mud and flowers rose into my nose. Children were playing, their laughter ringing bright and clear. A man was fishing by the water, his rod swaying with the rhythm of the river. I watched him, feeling a strange calm settle over me. The voice returned, soft and near, though no one else could hear it. "Do not fear what you do not understand. The heart that seeks will always find." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. I wanted to ask so many questions, but no words came. Instead, I knelt on the damp grass, letting my hands rest on my knees. My chest felt heavy with the weight of my thoughts, yet light with the warmth of what I had felt in the church. I thought about my friends, frozen in disbelief inside the church. Would they ever see what I had seen? Could they even understand? The question lingered, sharp and urgent. I wanted to tell them, to make them understand, but I realized that the path was mine alone. They could choose, but I could not force them. A cool breeze brushed my face, carrying the scent of the river and the distant sea. I closed my eyes and let it wash over me, letting my mind drift. The warmth from the church pulsed gently inside me, steady like a heartbeat. I could feel it in my fingers, in my toes, in my chest. It was real. It had changed me. I opened my eyes to see the sun breaking through the clouds, scattering gold across the water. The light reminded me of the glow in the church, gentle but powerful. I realized then that I had to act, that I could not just sit and wonder forever. But what could I do? How could I share what I had felt without words, without proof, without others seeing what I had seen? A man walked past, carrying a basket of fruit. He glanced at me, smiled faintly, and kept walking. I wanted to call out, to ask him if he had felt the light too, but I stayed silent. The weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders. I had seen something extraordinary, something that no one else could deny for me, yet I could not force it onto them. I thought of the bread, floating in the priest's hands, the light that had wrapped around me. I felt it again, faint but steady. I realized that it was not just a moment, not just a feeling. It was a message, a calling, something that would follow me wherever I went. The question burned in my mind. How could I live this truth in a world that would not see it? How could I honor what I had experienced without losing myself in doubt and fear? I rose from the grass, my legs stiff but determined. The city pulsed around me, full of life, full of noise, full of people who would never understand. And yet I carried something that was mine alone, something that would guide me, even in the darkest moments. But what would happen if I failed? What if the light faded and I returned to the darkness I had known before? Could I truly follow this path, or would fear pull me back into ignorance? I woke before dawn, the soft gray light spilling through the cracks of my small window. The air smelled of wet earth and smoke from distant cooking fires. My heart beat fast, but not with fear, only with the memory of the light I had carried for days. I could feel it pulsing in my chest, steady and warm. Our water shimmered gold and silver, and I water shimmered gold and silver, and I knelt, letting my fingers trail in its cool flow. A voice, soft but clear, filled the air. This is the path, do not turn away. I shivered, feeling it not only in my ears but in my bones, in my very soul. People began to gather unknowingly around the riverbank. I saw children, women carrying baskets, men hauling wood. The bread I had seen, the light I had, the bread I had seen, the light I had felt seemed to hover in the air. It glowed, not harshly, but gently, a promise and a call. And I knew in that moment that nothing could ever erase it. But I asked myself, would they accept it or turn away forever?